You sometimes meet people who prefer, rather than label atheist, prefer the label agnostic, and that they'll tell you they just aren't sure if there's a God. Or I've heard agnostics say things like the idea that when we die we just rot and become worm food, that one day the human race will become extinct, that one day everything ends in the fire at the end of the universe. That's so despairing and unlivable. I kind of just wish there was something bigger. But they can't equally hop into full-blown Christian faith, and they kind of park themselves in the middle.
How arrogant to think that Christianity is the only religion they could even possibly consider if they chose to believe. Most of the time, when I speak to someone who calls themselves an agnostic, it becomes pretty clear that they really are atheists. They just don't want the label because of people like you. The ones who put stigma on the word, who attach social baggage to it. I can't help thinking that's a bit wimpy, but it also shouldn't be an issue. Let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers, BionicDance here, responding once again to Andy Barrister. He's up to his old tricks, this time with two swing-and-a-miss arguments regarding the nature of reality and our thinking regarding it.
First thing I want to talk about is that desire that I hear many agnostics talk about for something more than just this life, something bigger than them. And that's a pretty universal human desire. Actually, most human beings today, and in fact throughout history, haven't been able to live as if the only purpose of life is to reproduce, pass on your DNA to the next generation, and then keel over and die. It seems to be that all of us need something bigger than ourselves to live for.
Okay, granted, this is usually true, but he's going to go off the rails when he gets to why he thinks this is the case. He wanders a bit, but we'll get there.
And I find that fascinating, because here's the problem for our atheist friends. If evolution is the only game in town, to quote Professor Richard Dawkins, if the only reason that you and I are here is to pass on our selfish genes to the next generation, then that raises the question, why is it that we have this desire for something bigger?
At least he's asking questions. That's the first step toward understanding the universe. The problem is that he clearly already has an answer in mind, which means the question is really rhetorical and dishonest.
You see, we're the only animals in the animal kingdom who do this. Squirrels don't sit around wondering about the great existential uncertainties that come when they fall out of the tree and die.
I wonder how he knows that. How many squirrels has he interviewed, do you think? But of course, squirrels are a bad example. We can make a fair assumption that their brains just aren't up to the task. However, there have been studies with chimps and apes that have shown their ability to communicate using sign language, among other methods. They have the brain capacity to possibly think of a greater purpose beyond survival and reproduction. But I'm actually getting ahead of myself. Let's move on.
What about this desire we have for something bigger than ourselves, for something spiritual, for God even? The only logical explanation for this innate desire is that there really is something out there designed to fulfill it and meet it and connect with it.
And this is where Andy goes completely off the rails. He starts by describing it as a spiritual desire, but that's not the only bigger thing to which people can become involved. There are, for example, political movements. You don't have to look very far to find people who've devoted everything, their entire lives, to, say, preserving the environment, fighting for the equal rights of various minorities, or even horrible things like racial superiority. Each of these are larger than one's own self, yet entirely mundane, nothing spiritual or religious about them. He says the only logical explanation for this desire is a god, but there is a much more reasonable source. Community. Living for more than just oneself, protecting the whole of humanity. No God required.
The Bible teaches us time and time again that God has placed this desire for him into every human being.
Oh, well, the Bible says so. I guess that clinches it, right? Or it's possible that the Bible is written by humans who had this desire and, much like their easily debunked scientific claims about the origin of the universe, wrote what they thought was a good explanation, but which had no basis in fact.
Which brings me back to agnosticism. You see, in some senses, being agnostic is a little bit like sitting on the fence. It's not willing to sort of abandon everything and leap into atheism, but nor is it willing to bow the knee and follow Jesus Christ.
Or become a Jew, or a Muslim, or a Hindu. Again with this arrogance that Christianity is the only possible choice besides atheism. I'm not saying I advocate those other religions either. I just think that if we're going to play this game, Andy ought to play fair with the other kids.
And what I would say to my agnostic friends watching this, it's okay to take a time to to figure things out, to investigate, to try and work out if Jesus really is who he claimed to be.
Okay, once again he's telling people to ask questions. He obviously expects a specific answer, but if he really is advocating skepticism in spite of his obvious bias, it's hard to not give at least grudging respect.
But one thing that will help you if you're an agnostic watching this, final thought, have you ever tried the agnostic's prayer?
Huh?
It goes like this. When you finish watching this video, go into a quiet corner, into your room somewhere, and just pray this prayer. Pray, Lord, I don't actually know if you exist. I hope you do. I think you might, but I haven't got it figured out. But Lord, I really want to know. Jesus, if you're who you claim to be, please, would you help me discover what that means? Would you reveal yourself to me and bring me to that point where I can put my trust in you?
Any agnostic who does this prayer right will look at religious claims and test them in an empirical and objective fashion. If you're going to ask the Lord any questions, it had better be in a face-to-face context, otherwise you're just talking to yourself.
I have many friends who have prayed a prayer like that honestly and have been very, very surprised by the answer.
Those aren't friends, they're Jesus fanboys. Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think.
Even YouTubers need Ferraris. Please donate on Patreon.
A thumbs up for this video is a vote for excellence and glory. Subscribe to BionicDance and make the internet great again.